Okay, we might as well have discussion now. I have never invited questions, and since I had the Hauk trial and there were 160 questions, it was awesome once they started, but I had some reluctance to invite them in this case because I thought it might cause some issues that could be avoided, and I thought it might take a whole lot of time. But one of the jurors has asked Deputy Rice what to do if they have a question. So I believe it is incumbent upon me when they come in to tell them what the procedure is. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Jonchuck.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Okay, let's bring it in.
Judge, I think the state has
Whoa.
a motion.
Is there something we have to do before we bring in the jury?
I believe the state wants, we've invoked the rule, and I believe the state wants to have their experts watch the trial. Which is allowed, Judge?
Yeah.
Well, we're objecting, Judge. These are not, they're not watching other experts, they're watching the fact witnesses. They've already had the opportunity to talk to these fact witnesses. They've already formed their opinions. So if they're going to watch this, then we need a chance to redepose them afterwards to see how their opinion has changed after seeing this additional information during the middle of the trial.
What's the authority on experts? I know that they can watch the other experts. Is there authority to say they can sit through the whole trial?
We have to look for it, Judge. I can't imagine that they can't. They have to watch these witnesses, they have to see what they say. If they want to talk to these witnesses again after they've watched testimony, we would not object to that.
Well, I certainly don't want another set of depositions being done.
Right.
And if they're going to talk to some of these witnesses, then another set of depositions gets done. I'm not going to do that.
Yes. Mr. Ellis seems to think our experts are going to talk to the witnesses on the stand. That's not what you...
No, they're going to talk to them wherever, right? Oh.
No.
Oh, I thought you meant...
Yes.
No. Yeah. So the experts are just going to sit in the courtroom and watch the testimony. That's what I was referring to.
Okay, well, the customary deal is they sit in with the other experts. I don't know what the standard is for having them sit throughout the whole trial. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think you'll find it. What's the purpose again for them to watch the witness's testimony?
Can we approach that?
Yes. We're ready.
Deputy Rice, go ahead and line them up, bring them in.
Almost had a casualty.
Those phones are off. All right. Jury's in the jury box and see.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Did everybody abide by the rule about not exposing yourself to anything about this case?
Yes.
Does anyone have anything they need to tell me about that?
No.
No, okay. One of the jurors apparently asked one of the deputies about asking questions. There's a specific procedure for that. If you want to ask a question, feel free to do that. What you need to do is write out the question, hand it to the deputy, and then the deputy will hand it to me. And then before the witness gets off the stand, the lawyers and I all have to, at the bench, discuss the question, and then sometimes I can ask it, sometimes I can't. It just all depends on the particulars of it. Obviously, you can write out your question whenever you want, but sometimes it's wisest to wait until after all the direct and all the cross to see if your question is answered, or to see if you might have more questions. And I need to be careful before each witness leaves, because some of these people are excused, never to be seen again in court. I will try to be careful and ask if anyone has any questions. I may not be perfect about that, but I certainly will try. Does that answer? Anybody have any questions about how to ask?
No.
Okay, you may call your next witness.
Officer Jenna Gillis. Gillis.
If you would stand right in your faces first, raise your right hand, repeat you would.
I solemnly swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
And now, ma'am, if you would, have a seat in the red chair. Speaking in loud and clear voice for the court, move up close to the mic, right?
Yes.
Would you state your name and agency you work for the record, please?
Jenna Gillis, St. Petersburg Police Department.
How long have you worked there?
Approximately 11 years.
You got a cold?
Yes.
Do you have any prior law enforcement experience?
No.
Were you working back with St. Pete between January 7, 2015 and January 8, 2015?
Yes.
Where were you working?
I was assigned to the street crimes unit.
Okay. What's the street crimes unit?
Just work street narcotics.
Okay. Around midnight, were you still on shift or had you finished?
I just finished my shift.
Okay. Were you in a marked cruiser?
No, unmarked. Unmarked.
Unmarked. Okay. What does that mean?
It has no insignia on it, no lights on top. All the lights are inside.
Okay. But you can turn on lights?
That's correct.
And they flash from where?
There's lights in the visor, on the side mirrors, on the corner of the headlights, in the back. It's very visible that it's a police car once the lights come on.
Since your shift was over, you were heading home?
Yes.
And what county do you live in?
Manatee County.
Okay. So you were heading over towards the Skyway?
That's correct.
Did you learn that a child had been thrown off the Dick Miser Bridge?
I did.
How did you learn that?
I heard it over the radio as I was going home.
Where were you when you heard that?
I was on US 19, which is the first exit you come to as you approach into Manatee County.
Okay. And what did you do when you got that information?
As soon as I heard it over the radio, I made a U-turn once I heard the suspect was heading south towards my direction.
Did you have a description of the suspect vehicle?
I did.
What was that?
A white PT Cruiser.
Okay. When you turned around, did you come to a point where you saw that white PT Cruiser?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us how that occurred.
Once I heard it over the radio, I turned around and I went back to the interstate. And I sat there and waited to see if it would pass me. Some time had lapsed, and I assumed that either he already had passed me and I missed it, or he pulled off. So you can't get back on the interstate southbound at that exit, so I had to get back on northbound. I looked northbound, I did not see his vehicle, so I figured I'd take a chance and go further south. Of which, while I was heading south, I heard another officer over the radio say that he located the vehicle.
What officer was that?
Officer Sousa.
Okay. What did you do at that point?
The officer had spotted the vehicle and had exited on the I-75 exit towards Hillsborough County. So I headed into his direction, and as soon as I made the exit onto 75 northbound towards Tampa, Officer Sousa and the suspect vehicle came into my view.
Did you try to gain ground on them?
Yes, yes.
Were you able to gain some ground on them?
Yes, I was.
Was there other vehicles on the road at that time?
It was very light traffic. I want to say when we first spotted his vehicle, I believe there was a semi on the road. I can't remember any other vehicles.
Okay. As you proceeded northbound, did the PT Cruiser do anything unusual?
Yes.
What?
As Officer Sousa initiated his lights and I activated my lights, the suspect vehicle made an erratic U-turn in the middle of the interstate and headed back towards my direction in my lane.
Is there 3 lanes going north at this point?
Yes.
Okay. You were in what lane?
I was in the center lane.
Describe the U-turn that the PT Cruiser made.
The PT Cruiser made a turn from the right lane all the way and made it into the median lane, coming back at me head on.
So you were going head to head?
Yes, head to head on the interstate.
Were your lights on?
Yes, lights and sirens were activated.
As you closed the gap toward each other, what happened?
I tried to see if I could move around. I remember there was a semi there to my right, and Officer Sousa was actually in the median lane, which was on my left. So as soon as I could, I got out of the way of the suspect vehicle.
Which way did you go?
I went far right as soon as I could to correct and come back around behind him.
So at that point, Officer Sousa was following him as he headed south in the northbound lane?
That's correct.
Could you see the driver when you were head to head?
Yes, I could.
Could you see anyone else in the vehicle at that time?
Nobody else was in the vehicle that I could see.
Okay. When you turned around, did you follow Officer Sousa and the white PT Cruiser?
I did.
So now the three of you are going the wrong way down
75.
75. At some point, were you ordered to stop that pursuit in the wrong way?
It's per our general orders to not pursue the wrong way on the interstate. So as soon as I was able to correct, I had to exit off at the Ellington exit and re-enter going the correct way on the interstate.
Did Officer Sousa also get off at Ellington and get on the correct side?
Yes, we both did.
Did you lose sight of the white PT Cruiser?
For a moment, we did lose sight of the vehicle.
Were you able to regain it when you were on the correct side of the road heading south?
Yes, we did.
Did there come a time when the vehicle was stopped?
Yes, the vehicle did come to a stop.
Where was that?
It was just before the university exit on 75.
And how was it stopped?
There was police officers that blocked the interstate and prevented him from continuing.
Were stop sticks used as well?
Stop sticks were used.
What are stop sticks?
Stop sticks are spikes that go through your tire and let the air out very slowly. That way to help the vehicle come to a stop if somebody's fleeing or trying to get away.
Okay. May I approach the clerk? Sure. Officer, I'm going to show you what's been marked, show the defense counsel was marked state's exhibit number 7, 8, and 9. Any question? Officer, I'm going to show you state's exhibit 7, 8, and 9. Do you recognize these exhibits?
Yes.
And what are these exhibits?
They are maps of parts of Pendleton and Manatee County.
Would these maps help explain to the jury your involvement that evening with the YPT Cruiser?
Yes.
Judge, may I at this point introduce these evidence of state's exhibits number 7, 8, and 9 for evidentiary purposes and publish them to the jury?
No judging.
Receipt.
May I move that, Your Honor?
Sure.
May the officer step down, Judge?
Sure.
This is state's exhibit number 9. What is that of?
That would be the interstate Cruise Center in Skyway, Jones County, and Manatee down here.
Okay. And where were you when you got the information regarding the child being thrown off the bridge?
I made a U-turn and stopped right about here.
That's where about US 19 is on as you
Yes.
come over the bridge?
Yes.
So the toll booth to go north is somewhere in this area?
That's correct.
All right. And you waited here for a while?
That's correct.
And tell us again what you saw?
I did not see the car pass me, and I assumed either I had missed it or it had stopped before me because too much time had lapsed. So I got back on the interstate northbound, as like I said before, you can't get on southbound at that exit.
Can you show us where you went?
Sure. So I got back on the interstate northbound, and there's like a cut right here right before the toll booth for emergency vehicles. I looked as far as I could northbound, and I couldn't see the car, so I took a chance and went back south and continued south on 275.
So you was part of the state's exhibit number 8. What is this map of?
This is of 75 into Manatee County.
Okay. So this is coming from the Skyway
That's true. That's correct.
up here?
Yes.
And you went which direction?
Initially, we went this way up towards Moccasin Wallow, which is where the traffic stop was initiated. And at that time, the defendant made that U-turn back at me. And as soon as I was able to react to come back around on him, then we were now going the wrong way on 75 all the way down to Ellington.
And that's where you got off to get on the correct side?
That's correct.
You said you lost him for a second, but were able to find him
We
again?
picked him right back up.
Okay. For record, this is state's exhibit number 7. And what is that a map of?
This is of Manatee County, State Road 70 here. University is just below here.
And this is just below Ellington up here?
Yes.
So tell us what happened.
So we exited back off and returned back onto the interstate. At this point, we're paralleling with the defendant as we picked him back up. I can't remember the exact area, but I want to say it was around this area, like around 64 is when we were paralleling at that time. We picked him back up and paralleled all the way. I radioed to dispatch that the next exits for stop sticks, what would help us would be 70 and University. A Manatee County deputy was able to, which I learned later, stop stick the vehicle at the ramp for State Road 70, and he was able to get one of the tires. Once the vehicle approached almost to University, there was several police cars blocking the interstate, at which time he came to a stop.
You mean physically side by side blocking the interstate?
Yes,
And at that point, he physically stopped?
he stopped, yes.
You can have a seat. When you stopped, what did you do?
Once I stopped, I pulled into the median and hopped the median, went out, and attempted to take custody of the defendant.
Okay. How far did it take? How far did you have to run to get his car across a lane?
A few lanes.
And were you the first officer to reach the vehicle?
I don't remember if I was the first. There were several of us out there.
Did you have a weapon drawn?
Yes, I did. I had my gun drawn.
Did other officers have their weapons drawn?
Yes.
The defendant was doing what?
He was sitting in his car, looking forward
Okay. Where were his hands?
on the steering wheel.
Was he saying anything?
No.
Was he being given orders?
Yes.
What orders?
There were several orders being given to him. I don't remember verbatim, word for word.
But generally, what were the orders?
Keep your hands where we can see him. Step out of the car. I mean,
So he kept his hands where you could see him.
none of our orders were.
Did he follow that instruction? Did he get out of the car?
He wouldn't get out of the car. The door was locked. His seatbelt was on, so we weren't able to really get to him at that point. The window was also up.
Well, how did you get to him?
Officer Sousa had to actually break his driver window.
What did he break it with?
An asp.
What's an asp?
It's a tool that you usually have on your belt. A lot of officers carry. It's like a baton and it extends.
Kind of like this.
Kind
pointer,
of
but
much
heavier?
like that, but heavier. Yes.
Was he then removed from the vehicle?
Yes.
Was he saying anything at that point?
No.
What happened next?
After we pulled him out of the window, we got him handcuffed, and he was then walked to a cruiser.
To walk to where?
A cruiser?
Your cruiser?
No.
The person that was the driver of the vehicle, do you see that person in the courtroom here today?
Yes.
Would you point him out and describe what he's wearing for the record, please?
He's wearing a blue shirt with a striped tie.
May the record reflect the witnesses identified the defendant?
Yes.
After he was placed in that cruiser, what did you do?
After he was placed in the cruiser, I returned back to the police station.
Have any other involvement in this case that
No.
evening?
No.
And a moment, Judge? Nothing further, Judge.
Cross?
So I would like to go to the point where you're going northbound on 75, okay?
Okay.
All right, and it's the white PT Cruiser in front, correct?
Yes.
And then Officer Sousa,
Yes.
and then yourself.
Yes.
And Officer Sousa was in a fully marked insignia cruiser, correct?
Correct.
And then you're in the lower profile.
Correct.
Okay. And as you're traveling north on 75, Officer Sousa puts on lights and sirens, right?
Right.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And you're behind Sousa still,
That's correct.
and you put on your light bar and all the
Yes.
markings, the lights that you have.
Correct.
Okay. And that's when John pulls over to the side of the road and makes the U-turn, correct?
I wouldn't call the side of the road. He made a U-turn in the middle of the interstate. The side of the road, I would say, would be like the emergency lane off to the side.
Fair. What I'm saying is when he made his turn, he went to the right and swung around, right?
Yes.
Okay. And as you just said, he did that right in the middle of the interstate.
Correct.
With Officer Sousa lit up behind him.
Correct.
And you lit up behind Officer Sousa.
Correct.
Okay. And he starts going the wrong way down 75.
That's correct.
And as he's making that U-turn, he's driving directly at you.
Yes.
And you had to take action to get out of his lane of travel.
That's correct.
And as he's driving at you, you still have your lights and sirens on.
Yes.
You were able to see the driver,
Yes.
and he was just looking straight forward, right?
His head was straight forward. That's correct.
So you're able then, well, Officer Sousa makes the U-turn to follow the PT Cruiser,
That's correct.
and then you make the U-turn to follow the PT Cruiser as well?
Yes.
Okay. And now you're going southbound in the northbound lanes,
That's correct.
down towards Manatee County,
Yes.
traveling 70 miles an hour or so.
Yep, that's right.
And other police officers from other jurisdictions are getting involved in this, right?
They're being notified. That's correct.
There was some Florida Highway Patrol that got involved,
In Manatee County.
and Manatee County Sheriff's Office deputies as well?
Yes.
Okay. After you get over onto the other side of the interstate, so you're going south in the southbound lanes,
Okay.
right?
Right.
You become aware that this barricade is set up down by University.
Yes.
Okay. And, many police cars are there in the middle of the road, right?
Yes.
At least 10 or so.
I would say yes.
So the PT Cruiser goes over the stop sticks, and you said one of them worked. It was able to flatten the tire, right?
Yes.
And so he eventually comes to a stop down there by the barricade.
Yes, he does.
And officers get out and surround the car,
Yes.
the PT Cruiser,
Yes.
and firearms are out,
Yes.
being held up at the ready to go, right?
Right.
Okay. And you go to the driver's side.
Right.
To where John is sitting.
Right.
Okay. You're all giving commands, right?
Right.
Show your hands, do this, you're trying to get him to respond to you, right?
Right.
And he did not respond.
No, he did not.
Okay. He sat there in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead,
Yes.
hands on the steering wheel.
Yes.
When you asked him to open the door or to come out of the car, he didn't do anything.
Correct.
Just sat there. Okay. He didn't look over at you,
No.
or any of the other officers.
I would know that. I know he didn't look at me.
Fair enough. He was staring straight ahead, right?
Right.
Okay. He did not respond verbally to anyone.
Not to me.
And either yourself or one of the other officers that were there tried to open the door.
That's correct.
It was locked.
Yes.
Window up.
Yes.
And so the window had to be broken, right?
Right.
And John had to be pulled out.
Yes.
And he wasn't resisting or fighting back. He was just not compliant with your commands, right?
Not cooperating.
Okay. May I have a moment, Your Honor? Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Does anyone have a question for Officer Gillis? No? Raise your hand. No? Okay. Can Officer Gillis be excused?
Yes, sir.
Defense, Officer Gillis excused. Thank you for your testimony, Officer Gillis.
Thank you.
State, you may call your next witness.
We have the state calls Matthew Laliberte.
Laliberte. Sir, if you would stand right here and face the court, raise your right hand, swear to take the oath.
You do solemnly swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. Now, sir, if you would have a seat in the red chair, speak in a loud and clear voice for the court. Make sure you move up close to the mic.
Morning, Officer Laliberte, is that right?
Laliberte, yes, ma'am.
Laliberte,
Yes.
thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Will you please spell your last name for the court reporter?
It's Laliberte, B as in boy, Erte.
And what is your occupation?
Police officer for St. Pete Police.
And can you briefly describe your training and experience to the jury?
I first went to the police academy, which is a standard FDLE course. And then I went through the field training program, which is approximately 14 to 20 weeks, along with, I'm now at FTO. So I also went to that class, which is a 40-hour class to train the new recruits.
And what is your current assignment, aside from being an FTO?
Standard patrol,
And what part of the city are you assigned to?
South Side.
What was your assignment in January of 2015?
South Side District 1 Midnight's patrol officer.
Were you working the evening of January 7th, 2015?
Yes.
And how did you become involved in this case?
I heard Officer Vickers say that he observed a subject throw a child over the bridge.
And what did you do next after you heard that?
At that point, I started to respond with my emergency equipment, my lights and sirens, to that area where he last saw this occur.
Specifically, where did you go?
I eventually was on the interstate of 275 southbound, and shortly after, I heard that another officer spotted the vehicle and that they were in pursuit, and it was going southbound on Interstate 75. And I actually caught up to the vehicle and the other officers during that time at approximately Ellington, between Ellington and State Road 64, which is in Manatee County.
Okay. So you went over the Dick Meisner Bridge,
Correct.
over the Skyway,
Correct.
in pursuit of the white PT Cruiser, correct?
That's correct.
And that was after you heard that the vehicle had been located, right?
Yes.
And which officers radioed that they had located the vehicle?
Officer Price and Officer Sousa.
Okay. Does Officer Price now go by Officer Gillis,
That's correct.
a new married name? And what did you do when you caught up to the pursuit?
At that point, I was trying to get ahead of the pursuit in order to try to lay stop six down to try to flatten the tires of the vehicle.
Okay. And what happened next?
At that point, a sheriff's deputy ended up stop sticking the vehicle, and the vehicle came to a stop just north of University, which is exit 213,
And which interstate is that?
I-75.
And this is in Manatee County, correct?
That's correct.
So what happened next?
At that point, I actioned my cruiser to make contact with the subject in the white PT Cruiser. And at that point, myself, Officer Sousa, and Officer Gillis attempted to take the subject out of the car through the window.
Okay. And were people shouting commands at the driver?
Yes.
Okay. And what lane of travel was the white PT Cruiser?
He was in the northbound lanes traveling southbound.
And where did you pull over?
I pulled over in the median, traveling the correct way, which would be southbound on I-75.
And what type of commands were you giving to the driver?
Stop resisting.
Okay. And what did you see after the window was broken?
I observed the subject gripping and clenching the steering wheel tightly.
Was he pulled out of the vehicle?
Yes.
What happened after he was pulled out of the vehicle?
After that, we placed him in custody and walked him to the closest marked police cruiser.
And do you see the driver of that white PT Cruiser in court today?
Yes.
Could you please point to him and tell us what he's wearing?
He's wearing a blue shirt and a tie.
Your Honor, would the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant, Jonchuck Jr.?
Yes.
Did you search him?
Yes.
Okay. And when did that search take place?
At the location of a marked police cruiser, which we walked to.
Okay. Was he searched before or after being placed into the cruiser?
He was searched before he was placed into the cruiser.
Is that standard procedure?
Yes.
What did you do with the personal property that was found?
All the personal property ended up being placed into a brown paper bag, which the paper bag then was given to the transporting officer.
Okay. Does that brown paper bag with his personal property stay with the transporting officer?
Yes.
And did that go with him to the Manatee County Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
Did you have any involvement with the white PT Cruiser after that?
After that, I was told to contact a technician, which technician Dunseith arrived, processed the vehicle and sealed it, and then I contacted our tow company, which would be Tri-J. They came out and towed the vehicle. At that point, I followed the tow truck driver and the PT Cruiser back to the police station where it was placed in the evidence bay, where the evidence bay was sealed by technician Dunseith.
And what was the purpose of you following the white PT Cruiser that was being towed?
Not to have any contamination of the vehicle of the evidence.
And which police station was the white PT Cruiser transported to?
The St. Pete Police Department.
Was that evidence base secured?
Yes.
Did that end your involvement in this case?
Yes.
Have a moment, Your Honor. That's all I have.
Cross.
Good morning, officer.
Good morning.
Now, Mr. Jonchuck's vehicle comes to a stop about 12:36, correct?
I don't know exactly what time it came to a stop at.
Would it help refresh your recollection if you were to look at the CAD notes?
Sure.
May I approach?
Yes.
That's what it looks like per the cat notes is 12:36.
Okay, does that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Okay, and so about 12:36 is when the vehicle came to a stop, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, you said you searched Mr. Jonchuck and collected the personal property on him, correct?
I took it out of his pockets, correct.
That included a $100 bill?
I don't recall what I actually took out because everything was placed into a brown paper bag somewhat immediately, so we wouldn't lose anything of Mr. Jonchuck's belongings.
Okay. When the PT Cruiser comes to a stop, a lot of officers out there on scene, right?
That's correct.
And a lot of officers approaching the vehicle, yelling commands at the vehicle, correct?
That's correct.
A lot of officers with their guns drawn, correct?
I did not see. We're looking directly at the driver at that time.
Okay. And so you are focused on Mr. Jonchuck the whole time, correct?
Correct.
And never do you see him look around at any of these other people approaching the vehicle, correct?
Not that I recall.
Never did he move his hands from the steering wheel that he drove up in the position he drove up on, correct?
That's correct.
And he in no way responded to any of the commands, correct?
That's correct.
You guys start breaking the windows in, right? Maybe not you personally, officers start breaking the windows in, right?
I assume so.
Windows are breaking in. Mr. Jonchuck never changes his gaze from straight ahead, correct?
Like I said, I didn't look at it. I was watching him and his hands that
Right.
were clenched on the steering wheel.
Right, and never changed his gaze straight ahead though, correct?
No.
And when you guys start pulling him out of the car, he doesn't struggle with y'all in any way, right?
No.
So it's just you guys are kind of pulling out dead weight out of the window, right?
Correct.
And he goes down to the ground and doesn't struggle with y'all, right?
That's correct.
And when you guys get him to his feet and walk him, he cooperates with you at that point.
Correct.
Okay. May I have a moment, Judge? You guys, y'all put him in Officer Carter's cruiser, is that right?
That's correct.
And did you see Sergeant Hubble come up and speak to John?
I did not see any of that, no.
Okay. Nothing further, thank you.
Redirect.
There you go.
Does anyone have any questions for Officer Laliberte? No? Okay. Excused or no?
Stand by, Ron.
Okay. Stand by. Thank you.
Thank you.
State you may call your next witness.
State call Officer Julie Bryan.
Stand right here for me, please. Face this foot, raise your right hand, pray to take the oath.
You do solemnly swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
And now, ma'am, if you would have a seat in the red chair, speaking loud and clear voice for the court. Be sure you move up close to the mic.
Good morning, Officer Bryan.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Please state your name for the record.
Julie Bryan,
Please spell your last name for the court reporter.
B-R-Y-A-N,
What is your occupation?
police officer,
And for what agency?
St. Petersburg.
Can you briefly describe to the jury your training and experience as a police officer?
I'll hit 24 years in June, being an officer. Went through the police academy. I've had interview and interrogations class, kinetic interviews. I was a field training officer. I'm a firearms instructor, general instructor, statement analysis class. I was a I went to sex crimes investigation, advanced sex crimes. I was a detective for 7.5 years.
What department were you in as a detective?
The sex crimes unit.
What's your current assignment?
I worked, it's currently called downtown deployment.
Is that a patrol position?
Yes and no. It's a specialty unit, so I mean, we're not 911 call driven.
Okay.
We handle problems in the downtown district.
Okay, as they arise downtown?
Correct.
All right. And so what was your assignment in January 2015?
We were actually called the bar squad then because we handled the issues at the bars. So we were downtown dealing with bar issues and staying in the downtown area.
Were you working the evening of January 7th, 2015 in that unit?
Yes.
All right. Do you remember a call going out that something had happened on the Dick Meisner Bridge?
Yes, I do.
Is that how you became involved in this case?
Yes.
Where did you go once you heard that radio traffic?
I originally ran to my car because we're kind of a foot patrol. Went to my vehicle and responded south to that area.
And when officers were responding to that area, was a lot of that self-initiated by the officers?
Oh yes, that's kind of just a given that you're going to respond.
And where did you go specifically?
I responded towards the Dick Meisner Bridge. There were already a couple of units there, and Vickers had advised the vehicle left southbound, so I continued southbound to attempt to locate the suspect.
Okay. Did you go over the Skyway Bridge into Manatee County?
Yes, I did.
And where did you go from there?
I continued southbound on I-75, and as Officer Gillis was giving information as to what they were passing as we were trying to gain ground on them. And ultimately, by the time I arrived, he was already stopped just north of the University Parkway exit, and I was in the southbound lanes.
And what did you see when you stopped at that location?
There were numerous officers, several agencies, and there were already enough officers around his vehicle, so I stayed on, I guess, the southbound side of the guardrail because there were so many over at his vehicle.
Okay. And what did you observe?
I observed them Several of the officers had their guns out. At some point, he was removed from the vehicle, and as they walked him over the guardrail, I followed them to Officer Carter's vehicle.
And where was he taken from there?
I followed Officer Carter, who had the suspect in his vehicle, and then we responded to the MSO. I think it's their District 1 headquarters. It's on 301 Boulevard.
And when you say MSO,
Manatee Sheriff's Office.
and did you go inside of the Manatee County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, we did.
Was the suspect taken inside as well?
Yes.
Do you see that suspect in court today?
Yes.
Please point to him and tell us what he's wearing.
It would be the gentleman towards the end wearing the blue shirt with the button down, and I'm assuming those are stripes on his tie.
Your Honor, would the record reflect that the witnesses identified the defendant?
Yes.
Approach clerk. Your Honor, I'm showing defense counsel has been pre-marked as state 10 for identification. Coach witness. Officer, I'm showing you what's been pre-marked as states 10 for identification. Do you recognize this?
Correct.
What is that?
That was a piece of paper that was taken out of his pockets during the search of him prior to him being placed into Officer Carter's car prior to transportation to the sheriff's office.
Is this in the same or substantially same condition as when you viewed it on the early morning hours of January 8th, 2015?
Yes, other than it would have been folded up.
Your Honor, this time the state asked to admit into evidence what's been pre-marked as states 10 and states 10.
No objection, Your Honor.
Received.
And did you view this letter?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the purpose of you looking at this letter at the Manatee County Sheriff's Office?
We went through the property that was in his, we call it the brown paper bag. Anytime somebody is searched, it gets put into the brown paper bag to see if there's anything of value that we knew his name, and all we knew at that point was that a child had been tossed over the bridge. So we were trying to ascertain whom it may be, and that piece of paper had names on it, so we ran with names to try and find out their relation to him.
And was this letter then handed off from you to the detective in the case?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to publish this to the jury?
Yes.
Your Honor, I have no more questions. This way.
Cross.
May I approach the witness?
Sure.
going to ask you some questions, officer, so I'll give it to you right now instead of... And that is a Social Security letter that you got from Mr. Jonchuck, correct?
It was obtained from him, yes.
Right. Found in his possession.
Correct.
Okay. And that letter says that if they don't hear from him, they're going to stop direct deposits, but they're still going to issue checks for the child, right?
I never read the details. I was looking for names, so I guess I can read it and see my interpretation. Go with your question
Doesn't
again,
matter
just
who's
so
the
I
witness.
can,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, let me just make it easier for you. I'm going to ask you questions about those two lines instead of making you read through that whole thing. So
yeah, because we looked
if
for
we can
names.
swap out, thank you. All right, so this letter says that if we don't hear from you, we're going to stop doing direct deposits and we're going to send the checks to our office, right?
Correct.
And then it says, when that happens, you're going to have to come into the office to pick up the checks.
That's what it says.
Thank you. Judge, if I can have the record reflect, I'm returning the evidence to the clerk, and I'll return the copy from the witness. All right. There was one other question I had about some property that would have gone into the brown paper bag. Did you see a $100 bill that went into the brown paper bag?
I didn't search him, so no. I mean, if there was one, then there was. I didn't itemize what was in his bag.
Okay.
My focus was to find names.
Yeah, that's kind of like you're doing a little separate investigation then at that point, right?
We were trying to find out whom was tossed off the bridge.
Right. You're trying to
Trying to
locate
get
the names
names
of
linked to
people.
him. Correct.
And whoever did the search of Mr. Jonchuck would have been responsible to take the materials and get it into the brown paper bag.
Yes. I mean, it's not uncommon. More than one person goes into his pockets. It's just everything goes out of their pockets into a safe place for us during transport.
Okay.
And obviously in the middle of the interstate, we didn't open everything up.
Let me make sure I got the timing right here. You said you were working downtown, and by that we mean downtown St. Pete, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the bar squad, so the, like, Central Avenue between, I don't know, Beach and 10th or something, that the core of downtown, so to speak?
Actually, we're assigned the 110 bars that run from Beach Drive all the way to 16th Street from 5th Avenue South to 5th Avenue North.
110?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you were there when you heard the call go out about the child being dropped off the bridge?
Yes, sir, I was.
And you, I assume, just as quick as you could, got in your car, headed in that direction?
Yes, sir.
Lights and sirens?
Oh, yes.
And you arrived in Manatee County I'm trying to see exactly. You got there, was Mr. Jonchuck still in the car, or was he just getting pulled out of the car?
He was still in the car.
Okay.
I believe my max speed, if you're wanting to know, was at 125 going over the Skyway when the trooper passed me.
I'm guessing that's full speed, right?
No, I didn't want to have a blowout doing that speed and have my own injuries at that point. I didn't know how fast my car actually would go, and that was the quickest I was going to go.
And you said a trooper passed you?
Yes, sir. Buffered right past me.
All right. Now, I think we cleared up or got some testimony that he was placed in Officer Carter's vehicle.
Yes, sir.
And Sergeant Terry or Teresa Hubble, you saw her at the location?
She was there, yes.
Okay. And did you see Sergeant Hubble get into the cruiser that Mr. Jonchuck was in?
No.
Okay.
She was in her own car.
After you were at the scene, did Sergeant Hubble ask you to get something out of the PT Cruiser?
Yes, she actually told me to get some property out of the car.
All right, and she told you to get out of the car a Bible?
Correct.
I'm going to object to hearsay at this point, Your Honor.
Let me clear that up. Did you get a Bible out of the car?
Yes.
Judge, if I could approach the clerk. If I could approach the witness, Your Honor. Do you want gloves?
Yeah, I don't have any on me.
I'm just going to ask you if you can, once I get your gloves, if you can look inside there.
Sure.
Judge, if I can approach. Officer, I'm showing you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit Number 1.
Correct.
Defense Exhibit Number 1. There's some gloves there, there's some scissors there. If you could open that up, please. Judge, if I could retrieve the exhibit for a moment from the officer. Guess they're good. Officer, do you recognize that?
I believe it was in a bag when I had it, yes.
Okay. Do you recognize what's in front of you?
It appears to be the same, yes. I mean, I didn't really focus on it. I was told to get a Bible out of the front seat, grabbed it, handed it off.
Okay, and you said that what you got out of the car was in a bag?
It was in a messenger bag.
All right, and you are not sure at this point in time if that is what you got out of the car?
If that's what was handed off to Carter, and then, I mean, I didn't search it out there. I grabbed what was on the front seat and handed it off. So if it's all through the same custody, then yes, that is it.
Judge, if I could have a moment.
Sure.
When you retrieved the bag from the PT Cruiser, who did you give that bag to?
It would have either been probably Sergeant Hubble or Officer Carter, because it went in Carter's car.
Okay, and to your knowledge, did it went into Carter's car?
Yes, I believe that's what my report states. It would have gone in Carter's car because it was his property, so.
Thank you. Judge, at this time, we'd move Defense Exhibit Number 1 into evidence.
No objection.
Receive.
And that's all I have, Your Honor.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
Anybody have a question for Officer Bryan? No? Excused or stand by?
Stand by, Your Honor.
Thank you.
May I retrieve the evidence?
Yes.
Will you approach, Judge?
Yes.
The transcript, we are objecting to the jurors being provided a transcript. I'm not certain that the state is trying to introduce this evidence just as a demonstrative.
We're not sending it back as evidence, but there's an instruction that says that, the Chief General.
And so we are objecting to that. I don't believe that it aids in any way. In fact, I believe that it would be most beneficial, obviously, for the jurors to be focused on what they can observe, not just what is actually said. And so I think by providing them a transcript, it encourages them to follow along while reading, which means they then miss out on viewing any of the things in the video. I don't have an objection as to the accuracy of the transcript. I don't believe that it's inaccurate. We are objecting though because we don't believe it actually aids in the jury. There's nothing that's, as far as the words that are spoken, that are confusing or are hard to decipher. And so I think it actually takes away from the full evidence being all of the observations and nonverbal information that's in the video.
Okay, overruled, and you can make whatever benefit from cross and replay it and ask them to look at it, whatever, but overruled. Okay, so we'll reconvene at 10:55.
All rise. We'll be in recess till 10:55 according to the courtroom clock.